Your gut replaces its entire inner lining every 3 to 5 days. Every 3 to 5 days, the surface inside your intestines is brand new. No other organ in your body regenerates that fast. Not your skin, not your liver, not your blood. Your gut is the fastest self-repairing structure you own. And that single fact is the reason this video exists, because it means that the damage happening inside your digestive tract right now is not permanent. It can be reversed, and it can be reversed far more quickly than almost anyone realizes. But here is the part that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. If your gut is so good at rebuilding itself, why do so many people over 50 have gut problems that never seem to go away? Why does the bloating persist? Why does the fatigue linger? Why do the aches and the brain fog and the stubborn weight around the midsection keep getting worse year after year, even when you are eating reasonably well? The answer is not that your gut has stopped repairing. It is that something is tearing it apart faster than it can put itself back together. And that something is not what most people think. Let me explain what is actually happening, because once you see this, you will never think about your digestion the same way again. The inside of your intestines is lined with a single layer of cells, one cell thick. That is it. And those cells are held together side by side with tiny protein clasps, almost like the teeth of a zipper, that scientists call tight junctions. When those clasps are sealed, your gut wall works like a perfectly selective filter. It lets nutrients and water through into your bloodstream, but it keeps bacteria, partially digested food particles, and toxic waste products locked inside the tube where they belong. Now imagine what happens when those clasps start to open. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, a little more each year. Tiny gaps form between the cells, and through those gaps, fragments of bacteria and their waste products begin leaking into your bloodstream, into territory where they were never supposed to be. Your immune system, which has sentries stationed all along your gut wall, roughly 70% of your entire immune system lives right there, detects these foreign invaders and does exactly what it was designed to do. It launches an inflammatory response. Not a big one, not the kind you would feel as a fever or a sharp pain, a small, quiet, constant one, the kind that burns like a pilot light that never turns off. Researchers have a name for this. They call it inflammaging, chronic, low-grade inflammation driven by aging. And a growing body of evidence now suggests that a leaky gut is one of its primary fuel sources. A study from the University of Florida, published in the Journal of the American Medical Directors Association, measured a gut barrier protein called zonulin in the blood of healthy young adults and healthy older adults. Zonulin is a direct signal that the gut barrier is too open. The older adults had zonulin levels 22% higher than the younger group, and those elevated zonulin levels were directly correlated with higher levels of two of the most damaging inflammatory molecules in aging. The same molecules linked to heart disease, joint destruction, cognitive decline, and diabetes. But the researchers found something even more disturbing. The leakier the gut, the weaker the person's muscles were, and the fewer steps they took per day. A leaky gut did not just predict inflammation, it predicted physical frailty. A 2025 study from the United Kingdom published in the journal Aging Cell went deeper. They examined 55 healthy older adults and found that those with the highest levels of gut leakage had dramatically more exhausted, worn-out immune cells than those whose gut barriers were still intact. Their immune systems had essentially aged faster because the constant leak of bacterial debris into the bloodstream was forcing the immune system to stay activated around the clock year after year until it burned itself out. And when the same team tested aged mice that had been raised in completely sterile conditions with no gut bacteria, those mice showed no age-related gut leakage at all. Their immune organs stayed young, their tissue stayed healthy. The conclusion is as simple as it is powerful. A huge part of what we experience as aging, the inflammation, the immune decline, the frailty, the fatigue, may not start in the joints or the heart or the brain. It may start in the gut. And if you can seal that barrier, you may be able to slow down the entire cascade. So the obvious question becomes, can you actually repair a leaky gut with food? And if so, how fast? The answer came from Stanford University, and it surprised even the scientists who ran the study. In 2021, a team led by microbiome researchers Justin Sonnenberg and Erica Sonnenberg, along with nutrition scientist Christopher Gardner, published a clinical trial in the journal Cell. They took 36 healthy adults and split them into two groups for 10 weeks. One group ate a diet packed with fermented foods, yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, fermented cottage cheese, kombucha, and vegetable brine drinks. The other group ate a diet packed with high fiber foods, legumes, whole grains, seeds, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. Now, if you had asked any nutrition expert on the planet which group would show better gut and immune results, Almost every one of them would have said the fiber group. Fiber has been the undisputed champion of gut health advice for decades, and the science behind it is real. Fiber feeds your good bacteria. Fiber increases the production of butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that directly nourishes your gut lining cells and helps seal tight junctions. On paper, the fiber group should have dominated. They did not. The fermented food group saw a steady, significant increase in the diversity of their gut bacteria over the 10 weeks, and the effect was dose-dependent, meaning the more fermented food they ate, the greater the diversity became. Justin Sonnenberg called this finding stunning and said it was one of the first examples showing that a simple dietary change could reproducibly reshape the microbiome across a group of healthy adults. But the diversity increase was not even the most remarkable finding. The fermented food group showed a significant decrease in 19 different inflammatory proteins measured in their blood. 19, including interleukin-6, the same molecule that the University of Florida study linked to gut leakage and frailty. 4 distinct types of immune cells also showed reduced activation, meaning the immune system was calming down, stepping back from that chronic low-level emergency mode that drives so much age-related damage. The fiber group, their gut bacterial diversity did not change. Their inflammatory markers did not improve. Not a single one of the 19 proteins budged. This does not mean fiber is unimportant. It is essential. But the Stanford team proposed an explanation for why it failed to produce results in just 10 weeks. Most people living in industrialized countries have already lost many of the bacterial species that are best at breaking down fiber. Eating more fiber feeds whatever bacteria you already have. But if the specialists are missing, the fiber passes through partially undigested. The fermented food group, on the other hand, was not just feeding existing bacteria, they were introducing entirely new species into their guts with every bite of kimchi, every spoonful of yogurt, every sip of kefir. They were restocking the shelves, not just putting food on them. And this brings us to the fermented food that may be the single most effective gut barrier healer in the entire category, and it is one that has been sitting in kitchens across Eastern Europe and Asia for centuries. Sauerkraut, fermented cabbage. A study published in 2025 in the journal Applied and Environmental Microbiology, one of the leading microbiology journals in the world, conducted by researchers at the University of California, Davis and collaborating institutions, investigated exactly what happens to cabbage when it ferments and whether those changes can protect the gut barrier from inflammatory damage. They used a laboratory model of the human intestinal lining, polarized intestinal cells arranged in a single layer, mimicking the real gut wall, and exposed those cells to the same inflammatory molecules that damage your gut barrier in real life. Interferon gamma and tumor necrosis factor alpha. When those inflammatory molecules hit unprotected cells, the barrier broke down. The tight junctions opened, toxic molecules flooded through. Then they applied fermented cabbage, not raw cabbage, not salt brine, not isolated supplements. Fermented cabbage, the kind that had been sitting with salt for 2 to 3 weeks while lactic acid bacteria did their work. The fermented cabbage completely protected the intestinal barrier from inflammatory damage. The tight junctions held. The barrier stayed intact. The toxic molecules could not get through. Raw cabbage did nothing. Salt water did nothing. Only the fermented product worked. The researchers then analyzed exactly what fermentation had created inside the cabbage, using 2 different advanced techniques to map hundreds of individual metabolites. What they found was that the fermentation process produced an entirely different chemical landscape compared to raw cabbage. The sugars were consumed. In their place, the bacteria had generated lactic acid, which directly nourishes gut lining cells, along with 2 compounds that are normally produced by beneficial bacteria already living in a healthy human gut, indole 3-lactate and phenol-lactate. Both of these compounds have been independently shown in other research to strengthen the gut barrier by activating specific cellular pathways that tighten those protein clasps between cells. The fermented cabbage was essentially delivering a package of gut healing molecules that mirrored what a healthy microbiome would produce on its own, except it was arriving directly from the food, ready to work immediately. And here's the part that makes this finding especially relevant for seniors. When the researchers tested these individual molecules in isolation, lactic acid alone, indole 3-lactate alone, phenol-lactate alone, each one provided only partial protection. It took the full complex mixture of metabolites present in the whole fermented cabbage to achieve complete barrier protection. The whole food outperformed its own isolated components. This is a pattern we see again and again in nutrition research, and it is the reason that no supplement can fully replicate what a traditionally fermented food delivers. A separate randomized trial from the University of Copenhagen put this into human practice. 34 patients with irritable bowel syndrome consumed either pasteurized or unpasteurized sauerkraut daily for 6 weeks. Both groups showed significant improvements in symptom severity scores, and both groups showed measurable changes in their gut bacterial communities. Interestingly, even the pasteurized sauerkraut, which contain no living bacteria, still improved symptoms, supporting the idea that the metabolites produced during fermentation of the acids, the indoles, the phenolactates are themselves therapeutic, independent of whether the bacteria are still alive when you eat them. But sauerkraut is not the only player in this story, and the reason I want to mention one more fermented food is that it addresses a different piece of the gut barrier puzzle entirely. Kefir, the tangy fermented milk drink that originated in the Caucasus Mountains, was tested in a crossover trial published in the Journal of Dairy Science. 28 overweight adults were given either kefir or regular milk for 3 weeks, with a washout period in between. Both dairy products improved cholesterol and blood sugar markers. But only kefir reduced serum zonulin, that same gut permeability protein that the University of Florida study found elevated in older adults. Milk did not. Same dairy base, same calories, same protein content. The only difference was fermentation. The bacteria in kefir, a complex community of over 50 species of lactic acid bacteria and yeast that is far more diverse than what you find in yogurt, produced something during fermentation that specifically targeted intestinal barrier integrity. The participants also reported slightly but significantly improved mood in the kefir group, a finding consistent with the emerging understanding that gut health and brain health are directly connected through the vagus nerve and the production of neurotransmitter precursors by gut bacteria. So let me bring this together because the practical takeaway here is genuinely empowering and remarkably simple. Your gut lining replaces itself every 3 to 5 days. That means the raw material for repair is being produced constantly. The barrier is not permanently broken. It is being rebuilt around the clock. The problem is that in most aging adults, the forces tearing it down, poor microbial diversity, chronic low-grade inflammation, inadequate short-chain fatty acid production are outpacing the forces building it back up. Fermented foods shift that balance. The Stanford trial showed that 10 weeks of fermented food consumption reduced 19 inflammatory proteins and increased microbial diversity in a dose-dependent fashion. The UC Davis study showed that fermented cabbage delivers a ready-made package of gut barrier protective compounds. The Copenhagen trial showed that even pasteurized sauerkraut improved gut symptoms in just 6 weeks. And the Kefir trial showed measurable improvement in gut barrier markers in just 3 weeks. You do not need to overhaul your entire diet. You do not need to spend a fortune. A few forkfuls of sauerkraut with dinner, a small glass of kefir in the morning, a spoonful of kimchi alongside your lunch. These are enough to begin introducing the microbial diversity and fermentation metabolites that your gut has been missing. Look for products that say live cultures on the label and that are stored in the refrigerated section, not on the shelf. Start small if you are not used to fermented foods because introducing too many new bacteria at once can temporarily cause gas and bloating as your system adjusts. A tablespoon or 2 per day in the first week is plenty. Build from there. I want to finish with something that I think matters. There is an enormous amount of fear around gut health right now. The internet is full of alarming language about leaky gut, about toxins flooding your body, about irreversible damage. And while the science behind intestinal permeability is real and important, the fear is overblown. Your gut is not fragile. It is the single most regenerative organ in your body. It wants to heal. It is designed to heal. What it needs from you is not a miracle. It is a steady supply of the right microbial partners and the metabolites they produce. And the simplest, cheapest, most time-tested way to provide those is a tradition that humans have been practicing for thousands of years, letting bacteria transform raw food into something extraordinary. A jar of sauerkraut costs $3 to $5 and lasts for weeks. That may be the best investment in your health you make all year. Thank you for watching. If this helped you understand something new, please share it with someone you care about. I will see you in the next one.